Welcome into the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. I'm Alfredo Brown, joined as always by Dave Kluge. Today, we're breaking down some of our favorite late round sleepers to target in your fantasy drafts. These are players that are getting drafted outside of the top 100. We're each going to present a player, give you our ranking, their average draft position, and present a case as to why we really, really like these players. And if you've been watching or listening to the show throughout the offseason, you're going to hear some repeat names on here. So bear with us. But we've got some pretty valuable names, players that can win you your league. Dave, you're starting off with Marquise Brown, wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs, and his consensus average draft position is wide receiver 49. I have him as wide receiver 44. You have him all the way up at wide receiver 30. So talk to us about Marquise Brown and why he's one of your favorite late round sleepers to target.
Yeah, I've talked about Marquise Brown a ton this offseason, and I know some people are scared off right now because of this weird injury that he had, and like the immediate reports that came out about this injury are like it's potentially life threatening if it's not treated right away. And I think people got really scared off by that. But reports are that it shouldn't impact his play when he does return at all. There's no risk for re-injury. Might be back week 1, not looking likely though. But worst case scenario is he's probably back in the field by week 3. And I've talked about it a lot this offseason, right? Like you look at the Kansas City Chiefs since they lost Tyreek Hill, they haven't had any versatile wide receivers. Everybody is either running deep downfield and clearing out the defense or catching routes underneath. And you look at the average target depth of the receivers last year, Justin Watson and MVS were 3rd and 4th in the league in average target depth, and Rashee Rice and Kadarius Toney were last and 2nd to last. And they didn't have a single guy that fell with an average target depth of between 10 or 17 yards. Everybody was either running deep or exclusively running short. And then you add a guy like Hollywood Brown into this offense, a guy that can kind of do everything. His peripheral metrics, and I'm hesitant to say this because I don't want to set the expectations too high, but his peripheral metrics through his first few years in the league were very similar to what Tyreek Hill did through his first few years in the league, where he can make plays after the catch, he can get deep downfield, he can play across the middle, outside, he can catch contested balls, he can kind of do it all. Now, Hollywood Brown, we knew he was a good player when he was in Baltimore, but they weren't passing the ball a ton, so we didn't see a lot of fantasy production. We finally saw over a very, very small sample what Hollywood Brown can do on a good, fast offense with a good quarterback. And that was 2 years ago to start the 2022 season with Kyler Murray. And if you remember, that was when DeAndre Hopkins was suspended. And over that stretch, Hollywood Brown was giving us wide receiver 6 production. He was 6th in the league in fantasy scoring over the first month and a half of the season. And then he got hurt. And then last year he had to play with Josh Dobbs and Clayton Tune. By the time Kyler Murray did return, he had a foot injury. Now, the concerns with Marquise Brown are obviously injury related. He has struggled with injuries throughout his entire career, but right now being able to draft him as like a wide receiver 5, a guy who legitimately has wide receiver 1 upside, there's almost no risk there and a ton of reward. So I think that's exactly what you're looking for in a sleeper. Like you're not looking for a guy who's going to give you 6 points a week. You're looking for a guy who could blow his expectations out of the water. And if the stars align for Hollywood Brown in this Kansas City offense, he truly has wide receiver 1 potential in fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think the easy argument that you can make in just one sentence is that I want good players on good teams. Marquise Brown is talented, and I want anyone that's going to be tied to Patrick Mahomes. So, yeah, especially if you can get him now at a draft discount. I don't have him ranked quite as high as you, but wide receiver 49 to me is like that's an easy buy anytime I'm sitting there in a draft. All right, let's move on to our next player. But before we do that, I want to remind everybody you got a bunch of ways you can enjoy this show. First and foremost, here on youtube.com/at football guys fantasy. If you don't remember the weird link that I just spelled out for you, just search football guys fantasy on YouTube and you will find us. If you're watching already, be sure to like this video, comment down below some of your favorite sleepers, or maybe your opinion on some of these players, maybe someone we left out. And if you're not already subscribed, what are you doing? Hurry up, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You're going to be getting all of our episodes the day before they come out on the podcast version. And that podcast version is going to be available on Apple and Spotify. And if you're listening there, please take a moment, leave us a 5-star review. It just means the absolute world to us. It gets our show out to more and more people. And it's going to make our big boss man, Joe Bryant, really happy. And it's going to let us keep our jobs, which is, that's important. Dave, speaking of our jobs and making Joe Bryant happy, you get a really cool live stream coming up this Friday on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern, I'll be right here at Football Guys Fantasy, hosting a live stream. This is going to be with our friends at the NFFC. We are doing a RotoWire online championship draft. This is their big contest. High stakes, so not going to appeal to everybody. A $350 buy-in, but if you win your division of 12, you win $1,500. Second place gets $750. But what really gets exciting is if you win the playoffs in this tournament, grand prize of $250,000. So I'll be live streaming that event Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern. We'll have a link in the description below if you want to join and draft against me in the RotoWire Online Championship on NFFC.
Nice. Dave making some money. I like it.
Hopefully,
That should be fun.
hopefully, yeah.
We'll
And
see.
the home leagues that we're doing, I've done some of those as well. Those I decided if I win, I will donate the money to charity. But in this one, if I win, Alfredo, I'll take you out to a nice steak dinner.
That's usually the stakes I enjoy, not the high stakes. I'll go with a medium or medium
Medium
rare.
medium rare steaks, yeah.
Yeah, that's where I go. No high stakes for me. I've been waiting to make that dad joke every single time you've done this read.
Proud of you.
That was the perfect segue. Thanks. Thanks. All right, I'm going to give you my first player here that I see as a late round sleeper. And honestly, this might be changing by the second because his ADP continues to rise. The average draft position for Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars, is skyrocketing. People are seeing what's going on in the preseason. And honestly, he's a guy that I've changed my opinion on throughout this whole offseason. I thought he might need a little bit more time to develop and get ready for the NFL. And I kind of said, okay, the Jaguars drafted a really fancy Lamborghini Gabe Davis. He's really good at stretching the field. He can go up for 50-50 balls. He can win deep. Awesome. Cool. And I didn't think too much of it. And as the season has gone on, watched a little bit more tape, paid attention to the offseason reports, and man, he looks fantastic in camp.
Mhm.
He looks fantastic in the games. And we're seeing that Brian Thomas is not just going to be a field stretcher. He can still do that. And that's where you get your ceiling with a player like this. But we're already seeing that he is catching balls over the middle. He's being used on intermediate routes. There are so many instances here in the preseason where he is leaving defenders on skates. And I know what most people are going to say. This is second and third team defenses. You still have to go out there and make the plays. This is a guy that he looks different when he's on the field. He has such an incredible control over his body, and you just don't come across players that have this size, this speed, this ability. He's out there putting up numbers and breaking records at LSU,
Mhm.
same school where we get guys like Justin Jefferson, Odell Beckham Jr. I'm not Jamar Chase. I'm not saying he's going to be them, but
We also got Terrence Marshall, so let's pump the brakes on the school comps. Yeah,
R.I.P.
so
Terrace Marshall. He just got
got
cut.
released today.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Thanks
Yikes.
for doing that. All right. So there, I'm done. There you go. Brian Thomas Jr., Terrace Marshall. There you go. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm a
Let's
big fan of Brian Thomas Jr. I love him. Sorry.
Yeah, no. I think there's a lot of potential here with Brian Thomas Jr. And that's what you're aiming for at this part of the draft is let's go for potential. Let's go for guys who can make big plays. And let's go for players whose value can consistently go up as the season goes on. And I think that's what we are going to see here. I'm not worried about Gabe Davis. I don't want to say I'm not worried about
I'm
Christian
not worried
Kirk or
about Gabe
Evan
Davis.
Ingram. No, yeah, I'm not. But I'm saying I'm not going to say that I'm not worried about Christian Kirk or Evan Ingram either. Like those guys, they're going to get their targets. That does not mean that Brian Thomas cannot succeed. What we've seen so far has been maybe not the best version of Trevor Lawrence. And I think that this year, everything is looking in the right direction. Trevor Lawrence gets another year of the Doug Peterson offense. I am expecting a bounce back for him. And we've seen that when Trevor Lawrence is doing well, he supported Zay Jones as a wide receiver 3 in
Mhm.
fantasy lineups. And I don't think it's that far fetched to say that Brian Thomas Jr. is better than Zay Jones as a prospect and as a talent. And if I can get a wide receiver 3 in fantasy for a wide receiver 4 or 5 cost in my drafts, I absolutely love that. And give me that wide receiver 2 upside with him and the big playability that he has. So Brian Thomas Jr., one of my favorite guys to draft as a late round sleeper, Dave.
Yeah, we also got to remember that, like, you said we haven't seen the best version of Trevor Lawrence. We kind of did last year. Like, they got off to an 8-3 start. He was pacing for 4,300 yards. He was having a good start to the season prior to those injuries. So I think Trevor Lawrence has got to check the box of being, probably borderline top 10. I'd say he's a top 10 quarterback, but I don't want people pushing back on me too hard. Borderline top 10. I think we can say Trevor Lawrence is there, and now he's got some really good weapons around him. So I'm with it. I remember back in was like February or March, way before the draft. We were talking about some of our favorite targets in this draft. And I remember talking about Brian Thomas at the time. He was my wide receiver 4, and I was getting a lot of pushback for that. And I said like explicitly that I wanted to see him land in Jacksonville. And then when Jacksonville traded down, I was just beside myself because they had the guy that they needed on the board, and they were lucky enough to still be able to get him a little bit later in the draft. But just a perfect match for what they need from that offense. Last year was very much so a square peg in a round hole situation with Calvin Ridley, and Brian Thomas really fits that role in that offense better than Calvin Ridley did. So I'm expecting immediate production. But like you said, with these guys, all of these sleepers that we're talking about today, they're not necessarily guys that are sure things that are going to, make immediate impacts in your lineup. It's kind of you draft these guys knowing that they have a ton of upside, but a guy like Brian Thomas might not do a lot week 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it may be. But I think we see him slowly ramp up as the season progresses. And that's what you do when you draft a rookie is you have to exercise some patience with those guys.
Speaking of rookies, let's go to the next player that you have on here. It's Blake Corum, running back for the Los Angeles Rams. He's got a consensus average draft position of running back 40. Dave, you and I both have him above that at running back 38. And I think we can both agree we don't know how much of a role there's going to be while Kyron Williams is on the field. However, we do understand that there is some major contingent upside. We're talking league winning, top 5, top 10 running back upside with Blake Corum.
And that's pretty much all I need to say. Like, I don't need to go on and on about Blake Corum. We know this guy was like the engine that powered the national championship winning Michigan team. Like, he is a very good pro ready running back. He is big and thick and powerful and fast, and he can be a 3 down back. Of course, the problem is right now he's in the shadow of Kyron Williams, and that's probably not going to change. But we saw Kyron Williams last year pick up 5 injuries, missed most of his rookie season with injuries, struggled with injuries in college. So, I don't want to put an injury prone label on anybody, but we have seen that Kyron Williams has struggled with injuries, pretty much through his entire college and pro career. So, really, what it comes down to is I expect there to be, whether it's 1 game or 5 games or half a season, whatever it is, if and when Kyron Williams misses some time, we're looking at Blake Corum as a potential top 5 running back. We have seen Sean McVay's tendencies to lean on a running back. All of the reviews we've gotten out of Los Angeles are glowing that Blake Corum is already picking up the offense, that he's getting involved as a pass catcher. He already got the preseason games off with the starters, which was crazy to see for a rookie. That's just what it comes down to. He is a good pro ready running back. And, we hope we don't hope for injuries, of course not. But if Kyron Williams misses some time, you're looking at a guy that you're drafting in around 10 or 12 of your draft that you're potentially getting top 5 weekly upside from. So Blake Corum is one of those guys that I'm drafting, stashing on my bench, and just waiting for his opportunity to arise.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what you're looking for with running backs at this point. You're not really looking at too many of these running backs when you get outside of the top 100 picks and saying they're going to have a consistent role. Now there are a few that are going to have a role regardless of who the starter is, but Blake Corum is one of those guys where I mean, they drafted him for a reason. They drafted him because he's got a nearly identical skill set to Kyron Williams. I think that Kyron's a bit more on the receiving side, where Blake Corum's a bit better of a runner, but we'll see how that goes. I think the whole thing here is just to understand that there is that upside, especially with this Rams offense, especially with Sean McVay. We've seen it before. It's a great insurance policy. That's what you
And
need in
just looking
fantasy.
at like ADP right now, like a guy like Gus Edwards is going ahead of Blake Corum. And I just can't understand that because like even if Gus Edwards is the lead back in Los Angeles, this is going to be a bad team, and they have other running backs that are going to be rotating in. Like, I just don't see the upside for a guy like Gus Edwards. Like, the best case scenario for him is that maybe he's giving you 8 to 11 points per week over the full season. Where Corum, you might not get anything for 75% of the season, but knowing that when he does start, you're looking at potentially getting 20 to 30 points per game. So when I'm at this point in the draft, I want upside. And there's a lot of running backs that are getting drafted in that area that feel like, I don't know if there's like a second dead zone, like we've got our early dead zone that we want to avoid, and then we've got this like second dead zone even later in drafts. But here I'd much rather take my risk on a guy like Blake Corum than drafting a guy like Gus Edwards.
Next guy that I have on here, Jameson Williams, wide receiver for the Detroit Lions. Consensus average draft position has him at wide receiver 46. I also have him ranked at wide receiver 46. Dave, you're a little bit lower at wide receiver 54. And I think it's justified for many people to be like, you know what? I'm not banking on the Jameson Williams breakout. We keep doing that. We keep waiting for it. You know what, though? I do think that we have to think a little bit differently with Jameson Williams. This is still a guy with phenomenal draft pedigree, phenomenal talent. I think that these circumstances for Jameson Williams have been highly unprecedented, where you have a guy who injures himself in his second to last, or I believe last college football game, and had to recover from that going into his rookie season, then gets the very weird suspension due to the NFL's gambling rules. And there's just been such an up and down, tumultuous thing for Jameson Williams. He's still really young. He's still, I believe, just 23 years old.
Mhm.
There's, to me, like, there's a very real world where Jameson Williams can be very similar to a George Pickens, a Jordan Addison, some of these guys that we saw produce pretty well last year. Except the thing is that Jameson Williams is going to be actually in a very, very good Detroit Lions offense. And had this been a year ago and we weren't sure about the Lions offense and Jared Goff, I wouldn't be as high. For Jameson Williams, though, we know that there's going to be opportunity. There's no more Josh Reynolds on this team. And I'm sure there's probably people saying if Josh Reynolds was stopping him, that he's not very good to begin with. This has been one of those things where Dan Campbell, I think, treats younger players a little bit different because David Montgomery was absolutely stopping Jameer Gibbs from being on the field, and it took a little bit for him to get there. Now the tune has totally changed around Jameson Williams. They are talking about him as a guy that they think has had a phenomenal camp. Even his teammates are saying that, and that's not something that has been said a lot. They're looking for ways to continue to get him involved, and they're not just going to be forcing him targets. He's actually getting open. He's not just simply a deep threat. He's going to be a guy that's being used all over the field. And so for Jameson Williams, there's an opportunity here where Dave, just doing some of the math here, there's a really easy shot where Jameson Williams could be averaging 6 to 7 targets per game in this Detroit offense with 3.5 targets off the board from Josh Reynolds. There's not really much else going on in this offense. I mean, there's only so many times you can target Sam Laporta and Amon St. Brown over and over and over. There's an opportunity here for Jameson Williams, maybe not to be the most consistent player that we want in our fantasy teams, but as you've said many times, we have to embrace the variance. I'm willing to embrace the variance with a player that is highly skilled, has a high draft pedigree, and is on a good offense. Because to me, like that's what we're shooting for here as we get into later drafts.
Yeah, I'm warming up on Jameson Williams a little bit. I definitely like him more in best ball because I think that you're going to see those big plays and they could be tough to predict. But anytime you got a guy who can take any ball and turn it into a house call, I want that guy on my team. I worry a little bit about what the usage will look like on a week in and week out basis. But when you're drafting a guy who's like your wide receiver 5 or wide receiver 6, you're holding him on the bench and hoping for the best. So I'm okay throwing a dart at Jameson Williams and seeing if it pans out. Like we know he's a good player. We can contextualize the slow start to his career with the ACL injury in college and then the gambling suspension in year 2. This is the first time in his career that he's had a full NFL offseason and will be a starter week 1. So it's kind of crazy to think that even though he's already been in the league for 2 years, this is kind of like his first real year in the league.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things that we didn't get to see a lot of him in college either. After transferring from Ohio State to Alabama, he had one phenomenal season, then it ends in injury, and so this is, in many ways, going to be his second real season of full college football. Like that's kind of what has gone on. Is this has just been his transition from one good year of college to the pros. So if he's going to break out, I want to be a part of that, especially at his current draft cost.
Mhm.
Dave, let's go to another guy who impressed a lot of us last year at the University of Tennessee, and now he's on the Miami Dolphins. I'm talking about Jaylen Wright, running back. He's a rookie. Right now, his average draft position is going to be running back 48. I've got him at exactly running back 48. Dave, you're a bit higher. You've got him at running back 39. We've seen how good Miami Dolphins running backs can be with Devon Achan, with Raheem Mostert. It is very fair to say that Jaylen Wright could be the next guy in line.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it's like a next guy up thing. I think that there's going to be a rotation here. Like, the thesis with Blake Corum is that you wait for Kyron Williams to get injured and then you plug Blake Corum in and hopefully get top 5 production. I think we're going to see Jaylen Wright involved week 1. Like I think there's going to be a rotation where Achan, Mostert, and Jaylen Wright are all going to be involved. Of course, if an injury happens to Achan or Mostert, then we see that role for Jaylen Wright grow even a bit more. But I've said it time and time again this offseason. Everything I said I loved about Devon Achan last year, said that he was just tailor made for this Miami offense. I'm saying the same thing about Jaylen Wright. Like you look, his size adjusted speed score, 95th percentile. He ran a 4.38 at 210 pounds, which is crazy. Like his size adjusted speed makes him one of the fastest guys on the Miami Dolphins. And that's what this team likes to do is they like to stress defenses as much as possible by getting Tyreek Hill deep. You got Jalen Waddle across the middle of the field. And then you've got these running backs that can get out in space and just put the burners on. So all these big plays that we have grown to love from the Miami Dolphins over the years, whether it's Tyreek Hill, Devon Achane, Raheem Mostert, or Jalen Waddle. Jalen Wright is going to fit right into that mix, and he's going to be having plenty of big plays for himself. So I understand why Devon Achane is getting drafted where is. You know, he had a phenomenal, efficient rookie season, but man, it's not crazy to think that Jalen Wright can kind of do everything that Devon Achane did last year, and you can draft him in the 12th round of your draft rather than the second round. So Jalen Wright, I just shared my Best Ball Mania exposure. Just finished my
Don't
150th
expose
draft
yourself.
last night. But Jalen Wright was up there, man. Like one of my most drafted running backs. It's so easy to see him paying off at that ADP where he's getting drafted late in drafts this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a theme here when you talk about Blake Corum, Jalen Wright. It's all about that contingent upside and what they could be if they were to get a larger role. And I was just on with Heath Cummings on the FFT Dynasty show for CBS. And by the way, flex. That's. I just wanted to say it out loud on the air. But he made a great point that Jalen Wright is not just a handcuff, but a double handcuff. If anything were to happen to either Raheem Mostert or Devon Achane, Jalen Wright makes his way into the lineup and becomes really valuable. And we've seen that this Dolphins offense doesn't just support one running back or one wide receiver, it's going to support 3 to 4 offensive playmakers. And these are all players that can be highly efficient with a limited amount of touches. So I really do like this pick. I don't have him ranked quite as high as you, but I do like this pick of Jalen Wright. All right, going on to the next player here. It's another rookie running back. And I think there's like that's the theme of this episode is rookie running backs that can really make their way in the NFL this season. I'm going with Ray Davis, running back for the Buffalo Bills. Consensus average draft position has him at running back 52. Dave, you have him at running back 49. I've got him at running back 44. I am loving Ray Davis. I am stealing Ray Davis in as many drafts as I can. Our very own Jeff Bell said yesterday that he's getting Ray Davis in every draft he can, unless he's in the draft with me, because he knows that I'm taking Ray Davis ahead of him. And a good bit of this is knowing that the Bills have been trying to have a running mate for James Cook in that backfield for years now, whether it's been trying to get Damian Harris, Leonard Fournette, or whether it's been Latavius Murray. It's been a bunch of guys that are a little bit older, a little bit busted, a little bit injury prone. Ray Davis slid in the draft because he was a little bit older as a prospect, but for the NFL and for redraft football, that does not matter. The Bills really only need about 3 years of production from him for that pick to be valuable. And in fantasy football, we only need 1 year. Like that's it. This is a player who Ray Davis, he's a bit bigger than James Cook, so he's going to likely be the goal line back. And I know there's a lot of people saying Josh Allen is already the goal line back. This is a team that wants to take that off of Josh Allen. They realize how important he is to this offense now more than ever, especially with the limited number of weapons that are on this team. They've got to keep Josh Allen healthy. They draft Ray Davis in the middle rounds of the NFL draft with a purpose. And the thing that sticks out to me, Dave, Ray Davis can catch. He can catch the ball. He can make guys miss in open space. He maybe doesn't have the same electric long speed that James Cook has, but man, his lateral agility, his ability to make people miss, to break tackles, and to do that in the passing game and to pass block just seems invaluable. And so I'm willing to take Ray Davis around maybe even a round and a half earlier than most people in fantasy drafts.
Yeah, we talked about Ray Davis recently in like these industry drafts that we've been doing so much of recently. It's like impossible to get Ray Davis. He's going in round 9 and 10. People are reaching for him like 30, 40 picks ahead of ADP. And it's easy to see why. Like he's a very talented running back on a very good offense. And James Cook, his efficiency really fell off a cliff last year when they gave him a bigger workload. So I think that they want to have a complementary guy there. And Ray Davis is the perfect complement to what James Cook brings to the table. So we're just going to keep agreeing on this show. I'm completely with you on Ray Davis.
I mean, that's what this show is. Like, this is not really the arguing show. This is kind of the episode where you don't necessarily miss because all these picks are late, and it's just there's such a low draft cost with them.
You
It's
don't lose your
hi-
draft by whiffing on a 12th round pick.
exactly. It's high upside, low downside. Like these are the guys that we love talking about. Dave, this is the player that you have changed my mind on throughout the offseason. I am on board. I am on the Taysom Hill bandwagon.
Welcome.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cozy. It's cozy. He's a tight end or a quarterback, but in a lot of leagues, he has tight end eligibility.
And that's the
And he's
important
one.
caveat here. You don't want
Yes.
to draft Taysom Hill as a quarterback. You only want to draft him on Sleeper, Yahoo, and other platforms that have him as a tight end.
That is it. That is exactly it, and, he's one of the I think one of the only 2 players that not Clint Kubiak, Dennis Allen on the Saints actually likes.
Mhm.
Right now, he's got a consensus average draft position of tight end 18. Dave, you rank him as tight end 11. I've got him as tight end 14. Talk to us about Taysom Hill.
He's been a top 10 tight end for 4 straight years. He has this weird kind of role where he is getting tight end usage and slot usage and quarterback usage and fullback usage, and now he's their goal line back. Like, he just does it all here. And it's weird kind of taking this utility player and expecting things from him in fantasy, but we have 4 years of data to look back at where, like I said, he has been a top 10 tight end. So it's not gonna be pretty. You're gonna have some boom weeks and you're gonna have some bust weeks, but those bust weeks aren't going to hurt you really all that bad because tight ends bust all the time. So it is what it is. Obviously, in Taysom Hill, I have a stronger preference towards him in standard leagues, not in PPR leagues, because he doesn't catch a ton of passes. In standard leagues, I've got him as my tight end 7. I'm a little bit lower on him in PPR leagues, still have him as a top 12 tight end. But yeah, Taysom Hill, if you miss out on the elite tier, just draft Taysom Hill late, plug him into your lineup, ride the ups with the downs, and you're probably finishing the year with a top 10 tight end.
But Dave, I'll never know when to start him. He's just
You always
impossible to
start him.
pick.
You always start him, and that's the thing. I think that's where a lot of people get lost, when talking about these boom bust players is like, when do I start him? And the reality is, if you try to play that game, anybody who's played fantasy football long enough knows that you're always going to be wrong. Like, if you have these boom bust players and you take them in and off your bench, he's going for 42 points on your bench and he's going for 3 points in your lineup. That's the way it is. So with these volatile players, you just embrace it. You plug them in your flex spot or in your tight end spot every single week, and you just ride the ups with the downs. And the thing is, like I said, the downs from a tight end aren't going to hurt you that bad because even if he's giving you a 3 or 4 point week, the reality is your opponent's probably only getting 6 or 7 points, so it's not that big of a difference.
Yeah, you've converted me. You've converted me. I'm fine if I don't get one of the top 7 tight ends or 8 tight ends. I'm sitting there just aiming for Taysom Hill, and someone who I must have been drafting with the other day, like, they must be listening to the show because I was ready to sit there and I was going to do the TJ Hawkinson Taysom Hill stack. Someone took TJ Hawkinson 2 picks before me, and I was like, well, it's early. I don't need to pick Taysom Hill right now. Like, he's not going till the 15th round, and someone took him in the 12th round. And I was just like, okay, all right, well, here I go. Welcome to the team, Pat Fryermuth. And so, like, it's not horrible, but I think the upside is definitely there with Taysom Hill, and that's what you want with later picks.
Yeah, we did this. I mentioned it earlier on the show, but we did this beat Dave Kluge league that we promoted a little bit, and
Did
it was
everybody win?
part of the home leagues, and yeah, somebody took Taysom Hill in the ninth round here, one pick before me, knowing that I had Taysom Hill. That was one of the hardest drafts I've ever been in because it is all listeners of the show, people who follow me on Twitter, wanted a chance to play in a league with me, and it was impossible to get any player that I wanted. I was just getting sniped left and right in that one.
All right, I'm going to give you my last player here in our last late round sleeper. I'm talking about Ty Chandler, running back for the Minnesota Vikings. Consensus average draft position has him at running back 46. Dave, you've got him at running back 44. I've got him at running back 39. I think there is going to be some actual week to week usage here for Ty Chandler that is not just going to be strictly limited to contingent upside based on an Aaron Jones injury. We've seen what happens with running backs as they get older, and Aaron Jones is at that age where production just simply starts to fall off. And a team with Sam Darnold at quarterback, while I think he can be fine and the offense can move, I think they will end up relying on the running game a bit more. And I don't think that they can rely on Aaron Jones to get 20 touches per game. This is a team that's going to want to involve Ty Chandler a bit more. And we saw last year when he was involved, he was very good. This is a player I've liked since his days at North Carolina. And Dave, just going back through it and looking at his weeks on a weekly basis in half PPR, we're talking about running back 25, running back 16, running back 4, running back 26, running back 33. These, I mean, they're not going to be totally crazy, blow you away week winning efforts, but you get a few of those with a top 16 and a top 4 finish. And we don't know what kind of offense this is going to be. Remember, that was with Nick Mullins at quarterback and Josh Dobbs, who was running a bit more. And things were just a little different for the Minnesota Vikings at that point. With Sam Darnold here, he's one of those guys that he has not traditionally been a check down guy, but that could change in this offense if he needs to get rid of the ball a bit quicker. Tai Chandler also been one of those players that we've seen can handle a full role. I don't think that if Aaron Jones misses time, which he did last year, by the way, I believe he was missed 5 or 6 games last year in total. If Tai Chandler is called upon to take over in that role, he's not someone that needs to split time with another running back. He can handle short yardage opportunities. He can handle passing downs. Tai Chandler is a guy that I'm really happy to take a shot on, especially where he's going in like the 10th round. Yeah, I think that the consensus average draft position is way too low on Ty Chandler.
He missed 6 games last year. Was healthy in 2022, but missed 2 games in 2021. Missed 3 games in 2020, and he's always had some leg issues, whether it's a hamstring or a knee. Now, going into his how old's he going to be this year? Yeah, going into his age 30 season, like scary for a running back. So I'm with you. Ty Chandler was the guy I was pounding the table for last year. He was my most drafted running back. I had him on more best ball rosters than any other running back, and he was also my most drafted guy or most rostered guy in dynasty leagues. I love Ty Chandler. He's a good player, and that's why I was so off on Madison last year. Unfortunately, it took him until about week 10 to realize that Ty Chandler was the better running back, but they did come to that realization eventually. And I think that, Aaron Jones is really good, much, much better than Alexander Madison, but 30 years
Of
old with some compounding injuries over the years. I think that the bet on Ty Chandler is very similar to the bet that you're making on Blake Corum, is that the lead back is going to miss time at some point, and if and when he does, you're getting elite production from a handcuff.
Well, there you have it. We gave you guys 8 late round sleepers to target players that are getting picked outside of the top 100 selections in your fantasy drafts. These are the players that, man, they're not going to lose your leagues, but if you hit on these guys, they can help you win your leagues 100%. This has been great. We're going to be back again tomorrow with our favorite players to draft in each round. It's been awesome doing this whole offseason and preseason prep with every single one of you that have been watching and listening. Last episodes have been blowing up. More and more people to the channel. We're super excited to have you guys all here. I hope that you enjoy the season and enjoyed the ride with us. As always, I want to thank you guys for watching and listening. For myself, for Dave Kluge, we'll see you next time. Adios.